Pushkin.
Indie rock band Nada Surf first hit big on college radio in '96 with their driving guitar-forward song, Popular. The band had started playing together 4 years earlier while attending college in Vermont, but they're perhaps best known as a New York City band, where their lead singer and primary songwriter, Mathew Caws, came of age. Caws is known as a vulnerable and often reflective songwriter who tackles everything from social anxiety to politics in his work. Nada Surf's latest album, Moonmere, is the band's 10th studio album, and it's every bit as introspective and at times hard-hitting as ever. On today's episode, Bruce Headlam talks to Mathew Caws about growing up on Manhattan's Upper West Side in a house filled with baroque music, and how he thinks some of the classical instrumentation may have influenced his own writing. Mathew also recalls the time Nada Surf backed up Joey Ramone and played a full Ramones set at Coney Island High. Plus, he performs 2 songs from Nada Surf's latest album, Moonmere, for us live. This is Broken Record, liner notes for the digital age. I'm Justin Richmond. Here's Bruce Headlam with Mathew Caws.
There's a new propeller churning up our days. There's a whirlpool spinning, digging us our graves. There's a growing menu of brand new mistakes. Same old ground I've always walked on. Now they call it fake. Don't be afraid, you won't be replaced. Don't be afraid, you won't be erased. There's a new day coming, we don't know its name. There's new methods brewing, some will be the same. There's a growing feeling going down the drain. Same old ground I've always walked on. There's always new pain. Don't be afraid, you won't be replaced. Don't be afraid, you won't be erased. There's a brand new flavor, acidic in its taste. There's a brand new picture, colors gone to waste. There's a growing feeling, nobody is chased. Same old ground I've always walked on, sliding in the lake. bright white light. You gave it a name and you set a price. Okay, there may be a God, and they love you with all their heart, but there's no place underground. There is no devil hound. Door prize, watch it go, it's a lovely twilight. We're alone, but you are the door prize. Watch it go, it's a lovely twilight.
Mathew Caws, thank you so much. From Nada Surf coming in to talk about your new album, Moon Mirror.
Yeah.
And we have lots to talk about.
Great.
And I wanted to get to that song, so we're going to start with it because
Wonderful.
You did.
Okay.
Tell me about that song.
Well, I started writing it a long time ago. You know, sometimes I start something and finish it right away, but sometimes I, write half and put it away for a few years. And I was writing this when Trump was running for office the first time, and he and MAGA, which maybe at the time wasn't exactly called that, but that feeling seemed to me like a giant cruise ship propeller churning up the water and destabilizing things. And then when I got to the line, "Don't be afraid, you won't be replaced," I was a bit nervous about it because what I was thinking about was people who have a demographic paranoia, who are afraid that they'll be replaced by another race or immigrants in general, and I was thinking in very simple terms. You are alive, and you will live out your life. You can't be replaced. You know the way, like, jealousy doesn't help? This fear isn't going to help anybody's life, And maybe that's not the point of it anyway, of that fear. It's a road to blame other people for whatever you have going on, and then a road also to anger as a relief. I think anger is a relief to people. Blame is a relief to people because then you don't have to feel your own troubles. But anyway, I was nervous about it because it seemed like it was flirting with sympathy, which I wouldn't want to be accused of, but I think I'm more thinking about just humanity. If people feel heard, sometimes they can let their defenses drop a little bit. I've had the experience a couple of times, at least, maybe 3, where on Facebook or something, I'd said something vaguely political or overtly political, and somebody had commented in an aggressive way, from, say, a MAGA point of view, for example, and other friends of mine would then, fight with them. And I found myself these 2 or 3 times talking to them very calmly and then taking it into private messaging and spending 2 hours just talking. And what I did find was that each time the person said at the end, I was surprised. I was used to Democrats yelling at me. I thought everybody would yell. So there's this, of course there's a lot of civility lacking, but also the sort of illusion that it doesn't exist or something. Those are the ideas I was playing around with it. And then Mark Pellington, who directed a video I think it's pretty great for it. He'd done a video for a song called Just Wait on our last record, and he asked to hear it, and I sent him the record, and he really zeroed in on that song. And what he really zeroed in on also was the sort of understory that I was also feeling at times, that once I started seeing those lines, I'm like, that's about AI, or it feels like that's what it's about also. When lyrics sort of match 2 meanings. And he zeroed in on that and absolutely thought that's what it was about, which I thought was great, because it just gave it another dimension. And there's a great podcast I like called Soda Jerker, and Lloyd Cole was on it. And one of his sort of best practices for songwriting was that he said, don't be at all attached to the meaning that you intended. Be okay. Be at peace with any interpretation, which I think is really good advice,
Well, I'm interested that it started as a more overtly political
Yes.
song.
Yeah.
But I didn't take that. And when you said you didn't want to betray any sympathy, I found those lines incredibly sympathetic.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Not just about AI, but
Right.
I think there's a feeling in society that people are so much more connected
Yeah.
through media. And yet, for that reason,
Yeah.
people feel more expendable.
Yeah. I'm glad you heard it that way. And I guess I was speaking very specifically about sympathy for white supremacists. Was the thing I was uncomfortable with.
Right.
But sympathy for people, absolutely. And I also find that's an experience that I have sometimes when there's a certain meaning sitting alone in my room and singing something. And then to an audience, what is the communal feeling? And I think the sympathy for each other that we need so much of, and any way to express it feels good or valuable.
Well, it's a terrific song on a really great album.
Thank you so much.
That I guess Rolling Stone just said is your best in maybe the best of your career, which is, you've had that's almost 30 years. That's pretty good.
I haven't seen that review yet. I just got a text about it.
Okay.
But I'm very pleased to hear that's what it says.
Your last record was Never Not Together, which on the surface felt a little more experimental. You had a choral intro, and a spoken intro, and another song. This one feels kind of more direct, and New Propeller aside, a little more joyful, and it's got that great sound that you have perfected.
Oh, thank you. These are such kind
tell
things
me,
to
because
say.
it is such a distinctive sound. How do you get that? How do you take that song, you go into the studio, and I'll even ask for the boring details of how you set it up and how you're recording. How do you get that great Not a Surf sound?
Part of, I guess part of any band sound is like what the rhythm section feels like, and Ira and Daniel, who are the forever members of the band, have a certain vibe together. So that's part of it. I think it's guitar layering is a thing. I borrowed a 4-track from somebody when I was 15 and sat down with my Who songbook and recorded a couple of songs, 2 guitars doing the exact same thing and 2 vocals doing the exact same thing. And I became immediately hooked on double tracking, which has led to triple tracking, etc. Just take it a bit further. And I guess I really like the sound of a few guitars doing the exact same thing. So it becomes a sort of supernature, you know? And certainly when you double track yourself, you're doing something impossible. Well, that's why siblings sound so special, I think. When siblings sing together, there's the fact that the grain matches so well.
So that's the Everly Brothers sound.
Yes, yeah. Right. Yeah, and so when one person does it, it kind of sounds fictional. You know, you're doing something that doesn't exist. But maybe that's the super magic of the Everly Brothers, is they sound impossible too, and it's impossibly beautiful in their case. So that, and just trying to fill it up a little bit. I'm always chasing the high of the first time I had shivers hearing a song. And I remember it was She's So Cold by the Rolling Stones on a little battery-powered FM radio under my pillow while sleeping in a tent. In the summer, we were working on our house, and there was no room for us kids in the house. And I remember that shiver, and, you know, I'm just trying to get excited or chase excitement or chase pleasure. It's like pleasure seeking in a way, you know, what sound is going to feel really blissful to me, you know, and I would never claim it is blissful in an objective way. I just mean to me.
So how many guitar tracks, for example, would New Propeller have?
In the intro, maybe as few as 2, just playing this, but with a pick. 2 electrics and probably 2 acoustics. So there you go, 4. Playing the exact same thing. And then this, you know, that's probably 3 or 4 electrics. So it's not crazy. We don't change mixers every record. We've used some of the same. John Aniello, who's a New Yorker who's now in North Carolina. John Goodmanson from Seattle mixed this record. He produced Lucky in its entirety. He did a couple of songs on The Wait It's a Gift. He did a few on If I Had a Hi-Fi. When you hear something again and again, you almost become too sensitive to it. And when he sent the first mixes, I actually thought they were over crispy. It's too much. And I'm sorry, John, this is just all hyped, you know. And in fact, they were totally perfect. And I think they're really beautiful and super well done. But sometimes you get a little too close to it.
When you get a tape like that back, or the mix back, do you listen to it in one room? Do you go to other rooms? Do you go to your car?
If I'm nervous about hearing it, I'll put it on. I have a little home studio. I'll put it on my little home studio and hit play and go to the other room. You know, like when you open an email you're afraid of.
Yes.
You're ready to shut the screen, or you're looking through, through a gap in your fingers.
It's funny. We just had a Crowded House in here.
Yeah.
And I think Neil Finn said something about sometimes the songs just sound better in the next room.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
And you're right. You're like, it has that kind of magic quality.
If I think that I'm tripping, I guess what I mean is if I think I'm being paranoid about something or having circular thoughts or obsessing or something, I'll just like put in earbuds and take a long walk and listen to it a bunch of times until whatever weird feelings I was having disappear. And it's like walking to objectivity. Like I have to walk out the overthinking or the panic or something.
Yeah. There's an old Latin phrase, it's solved by walking. I can't remember what the Latin is. Yeah. You just, you go for a walk.
Yeah, wonderful.
After a quick break, we'll be back with more from Not a Surf's Mathew Caws.
So let's go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
You grew up in New York, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Yeah. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up on 81st in Lexington. My parents taught at Hunter College, so they wanted to get an apartment near there. My dad was a philosophy professor, and my mom was in French at first, but then moved on to comparative literature and also English, and now at 91 has been an art historian for quite a few years. So,
did you grow up was it a musical family?
Only in fandom. My father had been kind of promising at piano, but he grew up in a fundamentalist Christian cult in England called the Exclusive Brethren, or the Plymouth Brethren, and he wasn't allowed to play anything but hymns, and he felt constricted by that and sort of moved on. And my mom had played a little bit, but they were fairly obsessive listeners to baroque music, and in fact to one record in particular, which I was so glad that I came around to asking my dad about that. I think I was in my 30s, and I said, I know it was mostly Bach in the house, but was there anything in particular we listened to? Because it's overwhelming. There's so much work. And he said, yes, 1052. So I went and found, it's BWM. There are 3 letters and then there's a number, and that's the way Bach works or are classified. And anyway, I knew every note. They must have played it so often because I felt like I could see the dust on the coffee table. It was so brought me back to Saturday mornings, Tuesday nights. Like they must have played it all the time.
And did any melodic lines or harmony creep their way into your songs?
I wouldn't know how to say that, but Phil Peterson, who played strings on The One You Want on this record and who's played all the strings on the last 3 or 4 albums of ours, we were talking about that, and he said he heard something baroque in some of my melodies, which I thought was a kind of a thrilling thing to hear, even though I don't even know how to interpret it. I don't even know, in fact, what that means. But I guess I liked hearing that. It's a nice thought.
And then you mentioned hearing "She's So Cold" by the Stones.
Yes,
getting that chill.
Yeah.
Had you started playing music by that point?
Yes, my mother's older sister, Peg Ryerson, passed away a few years ago. She had bought a guitar for my dad in the 60s, and he wasn't interested, so she put it in the closet. And then when I was 11, she pulled it out and asked me if I'd like to play it. And she showed me one chord, E major, and I went into the other room and played that chord for an hour. I was so thrilled. And I hadn't yet discovered the Ramones, which I would a bit later, but just doing that over and over. And then I thought, what if I move it? I'll move it up. What if I go this way? Oh, what's that? That's interesting. Oh, what if I move it over here? Oh. So I moved this one shape around.
The same shape you moved around.
Yeah. And so I started picking up then. And then when I was sort of 13 and 14, then I started playing it a lot more often.
But was there a band that inspired that, or the?
Yeah, well, my formative musical moment was when my best friend, Philip Plattel was his name. They lived near us, and I went to his house every day after school for years and years and years. And there was a real sweetness to our relationship. And sometimes when it was time for me to go home, he'd walk me home the 3 blocks to my house, and then I'd say, I'll walk you home. And then we turned around and walked to his house, and he said, I'll walk you home. And we would do that a few times. He had an older brother who went to boarding school, so I didn't see him very often, but I always thought he was really cool. He had these really interesting posters in his room and seemed like a lovely guy. And one day he was home from school, and when we were 13, and he said, "You guys want to come into my room and listen to some music?" Yeah, absolutely. So we went and sat on his bed, and he played us with no comment, front to back, 3 entire albums: Ramones' "Rocket to Russia," Velvet Underground, "Loaded," and Talking Heads' "Remain in Light." Those 3. And it was, I sometimes get misty thinking about it. It was so overwhelming. I was so interested and thrilled and knocked out, and it was funny. I mean, the Ramones songs were funny, really just rhythmically exciting moments, sounds I didn't understand, like Remain in Light. I can't remember which are the tracks, but there are a couple where it's a series of like impossible sounds, like an emotional computer or something. And then a kid at school, a new kid, gave me a cassette of Tommy, and I became a Who fanatic, and bought all their old records. And Pete Townsend started to feel like another dad or like an older brother or something.
It's interesting that he's, I think, underestimated as, not as a guitar player, but almost as an influence on people. He's so, he is unique,
yes,
but that propulsive style,
yes,
no one plays the way he does.
Yes.
But he doesn't, he's not in that pantheon of, I love Clapton or I love this guy.
Right.
But in terms of rhythm, he's completely his own beast.
Absolutely. And sound and approach and tricks and adventure. Yeah, I mean, and it's super punk. I know that word is a whole hours-long discussion because it's sometimes very slippery, the meaning of it. But just the wildly adventurous kind of reined-in, organized chaos and doing stuff that, sounded like the speakers blowing up, kind of all that pickup switching and string scratching, and it's just so exciting.
Did that music, I'm thinking particularly of something like Remain in Light, which is fairly esoteric.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you feel like, I can go do this?
Absolutely not. And that was the great thing about the Ramones and the Who. And I loved classic rock and loved the Stones, but really loved Zeppelin and Hendrix too. And that, to me, was not particularly encouraging music because it was so many steps away I couldn't see it.
I always felt that way because I grew up on that kind of music and just thinking like, it'd be like if somebody gave me like Itzhak Perlman and said, "Here's a violin," I'd be like, well, I don't know where to start.
Yeah. Whereas a lot of like Who and Ramones is sort of like, if you can drum this beat out with your hand on a desk, you can probably actually do it because all you have to do is put your fingers in a certain position to get a chord and get used to holding a pick and do that same rhythm you were beating out on the desk, do it on the guitar, and you're kind of there. Not to oversimplify. I mean, obviously they're incredible players, unbelievable. But yeah, much more doable, reachable. Yeah.
Well, there's something else I wanted to ask you about because you made a short little film about it, which is you had a tremor when you were a kid.
Yeah.
And do you still?
I do. I'm really lucky in that it's going the opposite direction of most people I know who have it. It tends to get worse. Mine is getting a little better, but I just had very shaky hands as a child. And it was, teased a fair amount for that. Why are you so nervous?
Because it made you appear nervous?
Yeah. If I would meet like my girlfriend's parents and they asked me to pour them a glass of water or something, thinking that something was going to go wrong, I was going to start shaking, would make me shake very much.
Oh, interesting.
So there's that kind of psyching yourself out problem.
What's the neurological basis for that?
Intentional tremor, and I wish I knew more, but it's something like intentional, i.e. when you don't want to do it, you do it.
So is it almost like stuttering? Yes,
exactly right. And it's gotten better in part because I'm just calmer and happier as a person. I meditate. I don't have totally, super regular practice or anything, but I do it pretty often. And just I have this theory that as you get older, you get happier because you were in so much danger when you were a child, or there was so much danger that you needed to communicate to your parents. When you were a baby, you needed to let them know you were tired or that you were hungry or thirsty or cold. And now that we're older, maybe our bodies are like, maybe it's okay to turn off some alarm systems now because things seem to have been going pretty regularly for a few years. So I've been experiencing this increase in peace as I get older.
It absolutely happens, and it's well documented, the U-shape happiness. The low point apparently is 47.
Right. Well, I'm past that.
They've actually, maybe they've isolated to the one day when you're 47. I'm not sure.
Right.
But I'll bet
June 8th.
when you were a kid, did the tremor affect how you played guitar?
Well, I think it discouraged me from getting too far into finger picking, which is kind of a regret. I'm trying to mend that now and learn a little more. Trying to figure out how to play Scarborough Fair and stuff like that.
Right.
But no, I mean, because once I'm into it, it would kind of disappear. It's like the first few minutes on stage used to be a little dicey. I think like my breath is going to be really short and I'm going to sing. You'll hear my nervousness. But that's gotten shorter and shorter and is kind of dissipated. But even back then, after a few minutes, just the act of doing something I love so much would calm me down and then I'd get through just fine.
You're such a propulsive player. Maybe that helps you to start.
Yeah, I think so. And I was just talking about XTC the other day. Andy Partridge stopped touring in, I think it was 82 or something, from stage fright. And I was talking to a friend about how he's seemed to be such an animated and active and compelling frontman, but maybe that's how he got through his stage fright, was by just becoming wild so that he would forget that he was afraid.
What's interesting to me about particularly this new record, because you have been a band that's been around for a while. Most bands that have been around this long, most singer-songwriters, some of my favorite performers in the world, they lose their fastball. It becomes very hard for them to do the fast songs the way they used to. But your band, you still do amazing fast songs. And I think you're I'm not going to say one of the few, but you're one of the bands that can still pull off a great fast song without making it sound like, here's our new fast song, I'm trying really hard.
That's
without
cool.
That. So what accounts for you being able to do this so well for so long?
Gosh, thank you for the very kind words. I don't know. I heard a Johnny Marr quote. He said something like, I have two speeds, fast and slow, or very fast and very slow. And so I don't know if there's just habit. Like I'm used to moving my right hand really quickly. I have like jittery legs, nervous legs. And I remember when I was a kid, I was at like a play with my parents, and during the intermission, somebody from 3 or 4 seats away came over to me and said, "Kid, you got to stop moving." But anyway, that was when I was a kid, so it doesn't explain now. I don't know. It feels like it comes naturally.
I'm not wrong, though. Like a lot of bands kind of lose their...
Yeah. Well, we check ourselves now and again and keep asking ourselves if it's too fast.
Right.
Because we tend to play everything faster live, just excitable.
Well, that's, that's the Ramones tradition, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't the famous quote, they asked one of them how the tour was going, and one of them said, we're doing it in 50 minutes, whatever, like crazy number of songs said, but we're trying to get it down to 45.
Well, we did an Iggy Pop song on a compilation called We Will Fall, 1998 or something, and Iggy Pop was on it. And the label was based in New York, and they wanted to have a record release party, and they needed a band to back Joey up. So we were the only New York band on that record, so they asked us, and of course we said yes. And they said, okay, you're going to do I Want to Be Sedated and 1970, the Stooges song. So we practiced for 2 weeks, completely obsessively. And then at practice for the thing, when he came, and we're just like grinning like kids. We're so excited. Daniel Ray, who's this great producer, was with him, and he counted it off at the speed that the Ramones were doing it, right up until the end. And Ira, our drummer, to his total credit, said, actually, could we do this? Could we do it at this speed? And clicked out the album speed, which is quite a bit slower. It's really 24 hours. It's not that fast. And Joey really liked it, which was it was so great. And then he said, after we'd done the record release party, he said, hey, if you want, the next time you have a gig in New York, learn your 7 favorite Ramones songs and I'll get up and sing them. And we had a show at Coney Island High 2 weeks later. And he did it.
Oh my God.
It was so great. I still have the set list. I can't believe it actually happened, but it did. It was a total thrill. Thrill of a lifetime, obviously.
Wow.
Yeah, so
that's
great.
fantastic.
Yeah, it was so great.
You see, even he wanted to go mid-tempo when he got older.
Yeah.
What
so great.
A great guy.
Yeah, he was so super sweet. Yeah, incredible.
Fabulous. So where did you meet your bandmates?
So Daniel Lorca, the bass player, he went to the Lycée Français, and I did too, because my parents took sabbatical years, and we lived in Paris when I was 5 years old, and then 12 years old later. And they put me in the local school, and I didn't understand a word, and then started to pick up a little bit of French. And by the time we got back to New York, I was Frenchish enough that my parents put me in that school. So Daniel was there. He's from Spain, but his father was a diplomat and they'd moved around a lot. So that's two of us. And then when we were 16, we went to see a band called the Fuzztones a bunch of times and thought their drummer was great and met him, and he seemed like a really nice guy. And there were a few times when Daniel and I had a couple of bands, and there were a couple of times, maybe only 2 times, when we needed a drummer and he said, let's call Ira. And I said no, because I thought he was too good. And I thought we might not be able to hold on to him. You know, a really good drummer in New York, who's also a really sweet guy and funny, you know, that's like gold. Mm-hmm. So I thought, let's not do
it's
it.
The unicorn.
Yeah, exactly. And then a couple of years later, I kind of started to have some confidence in the songs that we had. And I said, yeah, let's call him. And he joined up. And then Louis Lino, our keyboard player, was here in Williamsburg, and Daniel in 1991 moved into the apartment under Louis, and he had a recording studio, and we became friends and would sometimes record a little something in his studio. And over the years, he would, you know, mix a song here or there and add some keyboards to a couple of songs on a record, and finally started touring with us, and now he's full-time.
And then how did you meet Rick Ocasek, who produced your first record?
Well, Daniel would go back to Spain every summer, and we made a 45. A friend of mine, Joe Habaiko, wanted to start a label, but he couldn't afford to put out a single, and I couldn't either, so we split it, and I made the covers, he made the vinyl. And it was a song called The Plan, and Daniel took that to Spain and played it for somebody who played it for somebody, and we were offered a deal to put out a record in Spain. So we made an album and sent it to this label, and they said, well, we want it worldwide. And we said, you know, we knew that even though we were just pretty green, that if somebody didn't have something going on in the whole world, you couldn't give it to them for that. So I was sitting on this tape of a record that we didn't know what to do with, and I sent it to the indie labels I really liked and never heard back from them. I was sitting on the subway one day, and there was Mitch Easter, 12 feet away, reading the Daily News. I was too shy, and I regretted it immediately when I got out of the train and I hadn't given him a cassette. So I told myself, I'm never going to do that again. If there's a chance I'm supposed to take, I will take it. A couple of weeks later, I went to see Blonde Redhead at Knitting Factory, and I was walking out, and I saw Rick Ocasek walking in. And I mean, I'd always loved him. I'd always loved the Cars. I knew he was a producer too, and
he's
a really good one.
Underrated as a producer. He did a lot of music.
Yeah.
People remember him as a singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
But,
Romeo Void, Suicide, Bad Brains, and then Weezer.
Weezer.
Yeah. So I went up and said, so sorry to bother you, but I'm in a band, and could I give you a tape? And he said, oh, sure, is your number on it? And very gracious.
Wow.
And I never thought in a million years he would call, but I, as the saying goes, went out to dinner on that for a couple of weeks, you know, told some friends, you'll have regrets, so I gave a tape to you. And then one day I came home and my roommate said, you need to listen to The Answer Machine. And there was a message from him, and I called him back, and he invited me to his house. And beautiful spring night, I locked my bike to nothing. Just, I leaned my bike against a pole outside his house, but locked it to
right,
nothing.
You're just so...
I was so, right, just spaced out on cloud nine. And he was really sweet. And we hung out for a little while. You know, whatever. He had coffee, I had water. It's like 9 or 10 o'clock. And then he invited me to his studio downstairs, and he said, so what is this? What is this tape? And I said, well, it's this record that we don't know what to do with. And he said, well, you could put it out. But if you ever want to re-record these songs, I'll produce them, and I'll be really cheap. It was great. And he said, do you have a record deal? I said, no. And he said, well, just keep my number. And a couple of weeks later, unbelievably, we were playing a bar called Rebar on 16th Street on the West Side, and this really nice guy called Bobby McCain came up after and said, I'm in a label called Number 6, and I'd heard of them because they'd put out a Dean Wareham single, and they'd put out the Unrest record, Imperial, FFRR, which I thought was so good. And that was my dream, that somebody who put out cool records would come up to me after a show and say, could I hear a tape? So we gave him one, and the next day he called and said, actually, my day job is at Elektra, and my friend Ben Weber, who happens to be our manager now, played it for his boss, and he wants to meet you today. So we went up there, and we were offered a deal, which we turned down for about a month and thought about it. It kind of scared us, that was so quick. And I'd heard stories about, this was the period of commercial alternative when a lot of indie kind of bands were getting signed by big labels, and it didn't always end well.
No.
But in the end, we said yes. And he was great in the studio. He was incredible. He didn't let the label visit. They wanted to come down. He said, absolutely not. And we wouldn't have been able to stop them.
No.
And the other wonderful thing he did for me that was great was that when we would record a song, he would have me sing what's called a scratch vocal, where you go in and do, and he'd say, okay, do that one more time. Then we did guitars, and so about 8 or 9 days into the record, we were running out of things to do, and I knew it was time to sing, and I sort of nervously said, Rick, is it time to do the vocals now? He said, you're done. He knew that what I was going to do naturally after a take, relaxed, was maybe not great, but it was going to be better than Red Light Fever. So that was a really sweet thing. I think he's really good at young bands. Mm-hmm. My father figure.
Those car records he did were so, I know he didn't produce them all, but they were so slick and highly produced.
Yes. Yeah.
Your first record wasn't.
Yeah.
It was more ramshackle and did that surprise you? Did you think he was going to give you the Cars sound?
No, but it's a little wilder maybe than the Weezer record, for example. But I already knew that he really liked Suicide and stuff. So and Bad Brains, right? So he clearly liked wilder music also.
Right.
But he, even in the ramshackle nature of that record, he zoned in on certain things, said double this word, put another guitar here, and I knew what he was going for was a little precision.
Yeah.
Like when he would have me double track a guitar, he'd have me do it 7 or 8 times. And I was just doing the same thing over and over, and he was just waiting for the one where accidentally I'd hit it at the same microsecond and it had a little more pow to it, and he was looking for that, which is kind of a pop thing to be looking for impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, from there you've had this career it's like the history of modern music. You had a big single,
right,
popular, that's on MTV.
Yeah.
And then you're dropped by your label.
Yep. Yeah.
Then you put out the album where I discovered you, Let Go, where a lot of people discovered you.
Yeah.
And I discovered it because someone gave me a compilation they used to give out at Starbucks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Hear Music used to do them.
That's
and
right.
I know everybody makes fun of,
Those were great.
Starbucks music. Those compilations were actually fabulous. There are a bunch of great bands. And you did, it was Blizzard of 77, which I have to ask you about that song because growing up in Canada as I did, I heard that song and I thought, wow, this guy knows what a blizzard really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about that song.
Well, I remember blizzards in New York. I mean, blizzards everywhere. I mean, were snow days. Did you find that snow days were like heaven? I mean,
they were like magic.
It's like magic. And we'd wait by the phone to hear if there was the announcement that schools were closed in New York today. And I love that the city would disappear. All the cars are gone. Everything's white. Everything's new, clean. I knew that there was a big blizzard in 78. 77 was catchier number, though. So I moved it over by 1. But I was just thinking back to those joyous, that line at least is thinking back to those joyous days. And then you meet up with your friends in the park and you see people on, cross-country skis going down the avenue. And the cars are just lumps in the snow, the way the lyrics say.
Yeah. Then it becomes a love song. It's not a blizzard song at all.
Yeah. The reason it's sort of for us, kind of quiet song is that I was sharing a room with Daniel in a hotel in Amsterdam when we were on tour. I was starting to hear the song in my head and didn't want to bother him, so I went into the bathroom and played it really quietly into a little portable 4-track, and we liked the way it sounded, kind of hushed, so we kept it that way.
Is that how you write? Do you just have a 4-track, or do you sit down with pen and paper? What's your routine?
I do a little pen and paper, but that stuff doesn't seem to last. Maybe I'll fish a line out of it or something. But the bits that seem to have the best shot are when I sit down and write some words and a melody and some chords all at the same time, like all married to each other. And it can be just a short, like one little line. And some of them I'll really like and want to do more. Or it depends on if I'm hunting, like if I'm waiting for a song to appear or whether I have an idea. Because sometimes it's like a concept, and you chase it down.
One last break, and then we'll be back with the rest of Bruce Headlam's conversation with Mathew Caws.
What was writing like on this album?
Well, this is for the first time I had a real system for a little while, and that is that it was sort of tail end of COVID, and I hadn't done very much with all that extra time except spend glorious time with my then toddler. But it was really time to get the band going, and so for about 2 months, I woke up at 5 or 5:30 most mornings, and I found that it was because then I'd have the house to myself. My wife and kid would still be asleep, and I'd have the living room all to myself. And it's nice to be in a big room sometimes. Something about the sound not coming back at you from a wall that you're near is sort of less assaulting. But what I found, and it's a kind of a corny way to put it, but it's really what it feels like, is that my inner critic was still asleep. Because like a lot of people, I have a fairly active inner critic, and I'm ready to shoot down a lot of things that I make. And often the fuel or the ammo of this critic is like, this isn't, this isn't very good, and you should have started 3 hours before because it's 2 p.m. What were, procrastinatory, ADHD, whatever it is, whatever caused me to start later than I meant to, and that guilt turns into shame, etc. But I found that at 6:30 in the morning, I was just innocent. There's nothing wrong. I couldn't have wasted the day. There hasn't been a day. There hasn't been anything. It's all free. Maybe I won't use it later, but it's not wrong. It's okay. And the sort of heart of most of the songs was from those mornings, and I'd record whatever I liked that morning and label it with a date, and then every couple of weeks go back and go through those dates and see what was there and try to get organized. What lines did I like? Where the hooks? What hooks would go with other hooks, and sort of build it from there.
I just saw this interview with Ringo Starr, and he said something I hadn't heard him say before, which is that he gave a lot of credit to Paul McCartney for, he said, always making them work. And he said if it weren't for him, we would have put out 3 albums and been forgotten.
Right.
So what is it about your band that has endured? Are you the taskmaster? Are you the guy that gets them all working? Or is there some other dynamic that's allowed you to produce music for so long?
I'm a little bit of that guy, but no, because we work so much more slowly than the Beatles. It's 4 years since our last record, and they would have made 6.
That was half their career.
Yeah, half their career. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we're on a much slower track. But yeah, I get real excited, but we all do. We all love it. And the producer on the last couple of records has been this wonderful guy called Ian Lawton, who's been our sound man in Europe for over 20 years and our tour manager. And he's a get stuff done guy with a really sweet touch, not a sergeant, more like an encourager, cheerleader, coach. And he gets us going. But I'm fairly driven once I get going.
How much do the songs transform once you're with the rest of the band? From not a lot to a lot. It's really case by case. Not tons, but they just take on so much more life. And Daniel's he's a very adventurous player and will come up with pretty unorthodox bass lines. And it's so often something I wouldn't have thought of. And what I really love is sometimes that it will feel alien at first, almost wrong, and then I'm like, oh, it's great. I love that sense of adventure. Ira's like that too. I mentioned this album is full of like good straight ahead guitar songs. But Open Seas and Give Me the Sun, there's just a lot of really, really sharp songs. Can you talk about the first single?
In Front of Me Now?
Yeah.
So there's a very specific story to the song, and it is that I was at home, I was vacuuming the house, and I was wearing noise-canceling headphones. And my wife came up the stairs, and she said, could you fill the bath? I want to put some bleach in it and give it a good clean. I said, absolutely. So I start filling the bath. I put my noise-canceling headphones back on, and I keep vacuuming, assuming, of course, that I will remember that I'm running a bath. Well, I did not remember, and she came running up the stairs 10 minutes later, yelling so that I would hear her, what is happening? And all our smoke alarms in the house were going off because I was flooding the kitchen from the bedroom upstairs. Total, utter disaster, to my great shame. So I go into whatever action I can, mop, stop, try to turn off the smoke alarms. A few hours later, we get the power back on. Seems like everything's drying out. We stopped it in time. Nobody's mad. It's all okay. But I'm left with this cloud of feeling so dumb and disappointed and worried that this is my brain. This is the brain I have to live with. The only one I've got will do something like this. Unbelievable. And a couple of days later, I'm driving. I said it's sort of an errand to do, a couple hours drive, and I'm trying to get out of this funk. And I start making a deal with myself. I say, the problem is I do too many things at once. I'm going to try and do one thing at a time. And this cheers me up because, when you make a deal with yourself, it's kind of on credit, you know? I'll feel better now because I'm promising myself that I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. And, P.S., that thing and that song has kind of helped me multitask less, but only by like 5%. But still, every little bit helps, I guess. But so I started writing the song at the wheel, which is funny because that's a kind of multitasking too. But I wrote
that's
most
more dangerous, actually.
Well, I was definitely watching the road.
I hit somebody. With
no, I didn't.
car.
I wasn't using a pen.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about it. And I didn't get every line, but the concept, absolutely. I used to be this while I was that. Now I'll do what's in front of me now. Yeah, that's it.
There's something very joyful about that song.
Yeah.
That you're actually just going to take things as they come.
I think so. I think so. And just and it's kind of a tumble, which is sort of fun.
Yeah. You've got a great rhyme with Decembering. I can't remember what it...
Yes. In the middle of summer. I used to be haunting, not just remembering. In the middle of summer, I was Decembering.
Now, when you get an idea like that, are you just so eager to sit down because you just know the lyrics can be...
Yeah.
How far can I take this?
Yeah, totally. And what I enjoyed doing, I showed it to a couple of people, and I was just making up lyrics on the spot, and always messing up, stumbling and not able, because it's too fast to think of, at least for me, to think of new words or concept every few seconds. But it was just fun to think that it could be anything. I used to be cleaning when I was dreaming, or I used to be eating when I was sleeping, or.
Yeah, it almost feels like one of the old List songs, like Johnny Cash's I've Been Everywhere, or something like that just like goes through the whole...
I love a List song.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tell me about the song Losing.
That is by Louis Lino, our keyboard player. And we were at Daniel's house where we have band practice, and we were waiting for everybody to show up and just playing each other stuff, tracks or demos on our laptops. And he played me that, and just... I was floored. I loved the chorus right away. Really, really loved it. And asked him if he wouldn't mind, contributing it to the band, which means, splitting the writing and stuff, because we're kind of a collective that way.
Right.
No matter who writes. And yeah, he was into it, and I was thrilled. And hats off to John Goodmanson, who mixed this record, because he managed to make sense out of a whole... I recorded a lot of kind of My Bloody Valentine-y, early Teenage Fan Club-y, string-bendy, whiny stuff, which is a real mess, but he managed to kind of corral it into something that still works.
You're not a big string bender, but that's...
No, I'm not usually.
But you did on that. And Second Skin, which is the song that leads the album.
Yeah, that's one of the ones I wrote early in the morning, and just like the idea of those times in life where I felt I was hiding something or trying to present a certain way, which is not a lot. I haven't had a lot to hide, but you still have those moments, and just the not feeling good in your skin. Yeah, and just about that, and about how I've started to feel better. So it's kind of chronicling that a little bit, and searching for better ways to feel. What is it? I tried so many new and old ways to die and self-improve. From divining with dead sticks to fallen yogi hot moves. That's like, doing hot yoga for a while. And then just making friends with that skin, or maybe it's mine. Maybe this is my brand new skin. Maybe I'm not hiding anything. Maybe I'm just me, and maybe I'm just here. Yeah.
And the last song on the album, Floater, is a lovely, lovely song.
Oh, thanks. And that's kind of in a really Fisher-Price, my first riff kind of way, is an attempt at kind of a baroque feel. The way that guitar line kind of drips down, one finger moves, then the other finger moves when the one finger stays, etc. Which I love those moments at the end of Bach pieces where he hits the final chord, but then there's still some little modulations inside it, some little changes inside. I always find that really thrilling. And then the rest is another kind of looking for peace song.
Well, it is a very optimistic, great sounding record.
Thank you.
Do you want to play another song from it?
Sure. Can I play In Front of Me Now?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, great. Let's see how this goes.
I used to be dreaming
when I was driving. I used to be leaving when I was arriving. I used to be calling when I was walking. I used to be thinking when I was talking. I used to be counting when I was sharing. I used to be blanking when I was staring. I used to be rolling when I was parking. I used to be raining when I was sparking. Today I do what's in front of me now. Today I do what's in front of me now. I used to be stopping when I was trying. I used to be landing before I was flying. I used to be haunting, not just remembering. In the middle of summer I was Decembering, always rewriting what I was reading, but also doubting what I was conceiving. I used to be dropping when I was collecting. I used to be building when I was dissecting. Today I do what's in front of me now. Today I do what's in front of me. What's in front of me? What's in front of me now? I used to be missing when I was kissing. Why wasn't I present? I could have been living. I used to be dodging when I was catching. I used to be dying. I could have been hatching. I used to be drowning when I was drinking. I was only masking. I could have been feeling. You used to surround me whenever you found me. I could have learned more from the friends I had around me. I used to be falling when I was leaning, catastrophe carding. I could have been dreaming. I was careening, looking for meaning. Wish I was relaxing. I could have been breathing. Today I do what's in front of me now. Today I do what's in front of me now. Oh, there's too many lanes. There's too much to see in the frame at once. It's too much to contain. Oh, there's too much terrain. I can never explain it all. It's too much for my brain. I do what's in front of me. What's in front of me? I do what's in front of me now.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming in.
Man, thanks for having me.
It's a joy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks to Mathew Caws for taking us inside his creative process on Nada Surf's latest album, Moonmere. You can hear all of our favorite songs from Nada Surf on a playlist in the episode description. You can find this episode along with past episodes on youtube.com/Broken Record Podcast. And be sure to follow us on Instagram @The Broken Record Pod. You can follow us on Twitter @Broken Record. Broken Record is produced and edited by Leah Rose with marketing help from Eric Sandler and Jordan McMillan. Our engineer is Ben Tolliday. Broken Record is a production of Pushkin Industries. If you love this show and others from Pushkin, consider subscribing to Pushkin Plus. Pushkin Plus is a podcast subscription that offers bonus content and ad-free listening for $4.99 a month. Look for Pushkin Plus on Apple Podcast subscriptions. And if you like this show, please remember to share, rate, and review us on your podcast app. Our theme music's by Kenny Beats. I'm Justin Richmond.